Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into a dinosaur you might not have heard much about, Amargatitanis.
That's right.
We've got some really interesting paleontological research here. And, well, the goal is to pull out the story of this Amarga giant, from discovery to where it fits in.
Exactly. And we'll be relying on the scientific papers describing Amargatitanis magni. It's a great case study, actually, in how scientists work with sometimes pretty limited fossils.
And how ideas can change.
Precisely, how that understanding evolves.
Okay, let's dive in then. Where does the Amargatitanis story actually start? What was the first piece?
It begins back in March 1983. There was an expedition by the Museo Argentino de Ciencias Naturales in Neuquén, Argentina.
Okay.
And, well, the famous Argentine paleontologist Jose Bonaparte was leading it. They were working along the La Amarga stream.
La Amarga, hence the name later, I guess.
Exactly. And at one spot, which is called Site Number 1, Bonaparte himself found these bones, a large sauropod. He even noted it down in his field journal then.
Wow, Bonaparte himself. So what happened with those specific bones, the ones from Site 1?
They were brought back to the museum in Buenos Aires, the Museo Argentino de Ciencias Naturales. They got cataloged as MACN PVN53.
MACN PVN53. Got it.
And that specimen is key. It's the holotype. Think of it as the name bearer, the official example that defines Amargatitanis.
But that was 83. It sounds like it took quite a while for it to get, officially announced.
It did, yeah. A long wait. It wasn't until 2007 that Sebastian Pesagua formally named and described it as Amargatitanis magni.
Down the name. Amargatitanis magni.
Right. Amargatitanis basically means Amarga giant. Ties it to the place and, well, the fact it was big. And magni honors the museum, the MACN.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But I read there was a bit of confusion early on about what kind of dinosaur it was. A sort of mix-up.
Yes, exactly. A bit of a paleontological wrinkle. In that first 2007 description, Pesagua included some other bones with the holotype, a shoulder blade, MACN PVN34, and six-tail vertebrae, MACN PVN51. But here's the crucial part. Those bones were found later in 86 from a different spot, different rock layers.
So not even the same animal or time.
Correct. They weren't part of the original MACN PVN53 find, but because they were included initially.
Let me guess. They look like titanosaur bones.
You got it. That shoulder blade, those vertebrae, they suggested Titanosauria? The group with the truly massive sauropods.
So the first impression was wrong. Based on these extra bones?
Pretty much. It painted a picture of maybe another supergiant.
So how did they figure out the mistake? When did the picture get clearer?
That happened in 2016. A paleontologist named Pablo Gallina went back and really focused only on the original holotype bones, MACN PVN53.
Just the 1983 find.
Exactly. And his detailed look showed that those bones, the leg parts, the hip fragment, the two vertebrae, they actually had features typical of a different group, Dicraeosauridae.
Dicraeosauridae. Okay, so related to things like Diplodocus, but a specific branch.
Right, they're a type of diplodocoid. So Gallina's work basically set the record straight.
And what happened to those other bones, the shoulder blade and tail bits?
They were officially removed from the Amargatitanis material. Gallina identified them as belonging to some kind of indeterminate titanosauriform, so related to titanosaurs, but not Amargatitanis.
Gotcha.
And since that 2016 paper, pretty much all the follow-up studies, the phylogenetic analyses, they consistently place Amargatitanis as a dicraeosaurid.
Okay, the picture is corrected. Now, based on the actual holotype fossils, MACN PVN53, what can we say Amargatitanis looked like? What parts do we have?
So from that one individual, we have a good chunk of the right hind limb, the femur, that's the thigh bone, parts of the tibia and fibula, the lower leg bones, the astragalus, which is an ankle bone, and the far end of the first metatarsal, a foot bone. We also have part of the right ischium, that's a hip bone, and two tail vertebrae, one from near the hip, one from the middle.
Still sounds pretty incomplete overall, though.
It is. And interestingly, the original field notes apparently mention a couple of toe bones and another foot bone, but, well, they haven't been located since 2016.
Oh, lost to time, maybe?
It happens. The fossil record isn't always perfect.
So with those pieces, can we estimate its size? Was it still a giant?
Well, based on those bones, yeah. One estimate puts it around 12 meters long, so, just under 40 feet.
Okay, decent size.
And maybe weighing around 3.5 metric tons, nearly 4 short tons.
Yep.
So, yeah, not Argentinosaurus level huge, but definitely a big animal. Smaller than the initial Titanosaur idea suggested, though.
Right, and being a dicraeosaurid, Who would it resemble, like, visually?
You'd probably think of things like Dicryosaurus itself, or maybe the more famous one, Amargasaurus, which was found in the same formation, actually.
Right, with the neck spines.
Exactly. Dicryosaurids generally had shorter necks than, say, diplodocids, and they often had those long neural spines sticking up from their vertebrae. We don't have complete spines for Amargatitanis, but it likely shared that shorter neck profile.
And presumably robust legs, long tail, the usual sauropod build.
We infer that, yes, sturdy limbs, long tail, pretty standard sauropod stuff there.
Are there any really specific defining features in the bones we do have? Any quirks?
There are a few interesting details, yeah. The tail vertebrae centra, the main body of the vertebrae, they have this thin, vertical, bony plate that's seen in the broader group called Flagellicodanans, which includes Dicryosaurids.
Okay.
But interestingly, Amargatitanis is missing certain ridges on the lower sides of those vertebrae. Most Dicryosaurids have them, but Amargatitanis doesn't, which is actually similar to another one called Pilmatuea.
Okay. What about the hip bone, the ischium?
Generally similar to other Flagellicodanans, but it has a straight back edge, which is unusual. It actually shares that feature with the giant Brachiosaurid Giraffatinan.
Weird connection. And the leg bones. Anything stand out there?
Oh, absolutely. The femur, the thigh bone, is quite distinct. It's much wider at the top where it connects to the hip compared to the bottom end near the knee.
Really? How different?
Significantly wider. In most other sauropods, like Dicryosaurus, those ends are much closer in width. So this suggests maybe different muscle attachments or weight distribution for Amargatitanis. It's a key feature.
Interesting.
And also, like other Dicryosaurids, it doesn't have that big bulge on the outer side of the femur that you see in Titanosaurs and their relatives. That lack of a bulge was one of the clues pointing away from Titanosauria.
Ah, right. Connects back to the reclassification. What about the lower leg?
The tibia, the main lower leg bone, has a pretty low crest at the top, the conmamal crest. Similar to Dicryosaurus and Amargasaurus, lower than in many other sauropod groups.
And the foot and ankle. Any oddities there?
The ankle bone, the astragalus, has this deep crescent-shaped fossa, like a depression on the back, and a unique pattern of small holes, foramina. The first metatarsal, the foot bone, its toe end is oval, not pinched like in Dicryosaurus, and it has a distinct bump on the back outer side, which again is common in Flagellicatans.
So even these fragments tell a pretty specific story.
They really do. Each bone adds a piece to the puzzle, distinguishing it.
Okay, let's cement its place in the family tree. We know the initial mistake was Titanosauria. What were those key features again that screamed Dicryosauridae once Galena looked closely?
The two big ones were, number one, no lateral bulge on the femur. That's very un-Titanosauriform.
Right.
And number two, the vertebrae were procellus, meaning the front surface of the centrum is concave, hollowed out, and the back surface is convex, rounded. That specific type of joint is characteristic of Dicryosaurids.
Got it. And within the Dicrayosaurid family itself, where does Amargatitanis sit? Is it an early offshoot or closer to others?
Most of the phylogenetic studies, the ones that map out relationships, tend to place Amargatitanis near the base of the Dicryosauridae family tree.
So potentially one of the earlier members of the group.
Potentially, yes. Representing an early branch.
And isn't there an idea about a sort of South American subgroup?
Yes, there is. Some research suggests that these South American Dicryosaurids found, Amargatitanis, Pilmatuea, and Bajadasaurus, might form their own distinct evolutionary group, or clade.
Based on geography and features.
Exactly. Shared features and, well, they're all found there. The bigger picture hypothesis tied to this is that maybe Dicryosauridae first evolved in North America, think Sawassi or Smetanosaurus, and then spread out, including migrating down to South America.
That's fascinating, imagining these dinosaurs dispersing across continents.
Yeah.
Has that placement of Amargatitanis stayed consistent? Any recent updates?
Well, science is always evolving, right? A more recent analysis from 2023 actually put Amargatitanis a bit higher up the tree, maybe more advanced than basal.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this study placed it in what's called a polymetomy, basically an unresolved branching point alongside Pilmatuea, and a cluster containing Brachiotrachypan, Dicryosaurus, and its neighbor, Amargasaurus.
So the exact spot is still a bit debated.
It seems so. We likely need more fossils, more data, to really nail down its precise relationships within the family. It's still an active area of research.
Always more to discover. Okay, shifting gears a bit. Can we learn anything about how this specific Amargatitanis lived? Like its life story from its bones?
We can actually, through bone histology. That's looking at the microscopic structure inside the bones.
Like tree rings, sort of?
Exactly like tree rings.
Yeah.
A study in 2021 sliced up a piece of the Amargatitanis femur and looked for cyclical growth marks, or CGMs. These reflect periods where growth slowed down, maybe seasonally.
And what did they find in this individual? How old was it?
They counted 19 of these growth marks, so this Amargatitanis was at least 19 years old when it died.
19 years. Not bad.
And what's more, the outermost 6 rings were really tightly packed together. This forms something called an EFS, an external fundamental system.
Which means?
It's generally taken as strong evidence that the animal had stopped growing significantly. It had reached its adult size, skeletal maturity, and likely sexual maturity too.
So it's a fully grown adult at 19 plus min.
Yes, and there was also significant remodeling of the outer bone layers, which also points to maturity in sauropods.
Did the study find anything unusual about that number of growth rings? 19 seems like quite a few for a sauropod.
It is relatively high, yeah. Sauropods are often thought of as growing incredibly fast and continuously.
Right, just non-stop growth.
But finding so many distinct growth marks in Amargatitanis maybe suggests that wasn't always the case. It raises the possibility that at least some sauropods, maybe this one included, had more discontinuous growth periods of fast growth alternating with slower periods.
Adds another layer to how these giants lived. Fascinating stuff. Okay, finally, let's zoom out. The environment. What was the world like where Amargatitanis lived?
It lived during the early Cretaceous, specifically the Barremian to early Aptian stages. That's around 129 to 123 million years ago.
Okay.
And its fossils come from the La Amarga Formation in the Neuquén Basin, Argentina. Specifically, most of the finds are from the lower part of that formation, a section called the Puesto Antiguo Member.
And what do the rocks of the Puesto Antiguo Member tell us? What kind of place was it?
It's mostly sandstones, about 29 meters thick. And these sandstones look like they were laid down by braided rivers, basically. A network of shifting river channels flowing across a landscape.
A riverine environment, then.
Seems so. Dynamic. Lots of water, lots of sediment moving around.
And Amargatitanis wasn't alone there, right? You mentioned Amargasaurus. Sounds like a busy place for sauropods.
It really was surprisingly diverse. You had Amargatitanis and Amargasaurus, both dicryosaurids. Then there was Zapallosaurus, which was a more primitive type of sauropod called a Rabacosaurid.
Okay.
And finds of other unnamed basal diplodocoids too. So quite a few different long mechs wandering around.
How did they all manage? Were they competing fiercely for food?
Probably not directly, no. The evidence suggests niche partitioning, basically eating different things or at different heights.
Ah, like giraffes and zebras today?
Kind of, yeah. So for instance, some early titanosauriforms found their head features suggesting they could browse higher up, maybe longer necks, different teeth.
Right.
Amargatitanis and Amargasaurus, with their shorter necks, likely fed lower down, maybe up to about 2.7 meters, so roughly 9 feet off the ground.
And the Rabatisaurids, like Zapallosaurus?
They were probably ground-level specialists, really low browsers, so everyone had their own feeding zone, more or less.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
A complex ecosystem. What else lived there besides sauropods?
Well, there's evidence of a stegosaur, though it hasn't been fully identified. There was a small meat-eater, the Ceratosaur ligaboino.
Old predator.
Yeah, and teeth suggest a much larger predator, some kind of big titanuran, was around too.
Oh, okay, so big predators too.
Definitely. And then very significantly, there's Vincellus, the only mammal known from the early Cretaceous of South America, a really important find.
Wow. And crocodile relatives.
Yep. Amargasuchus, a type of crocodilomorph, was also part of the fauna. So yeah, a really unique mix of creatures.
It paints such a vivid picture.
Okay.
Okay, so let's wrap up this deep dive on Amargatitanis. What are the main takeaways for us?
I think the big picture is seeing this Amarga giant go from being mistaken for a huge titanosaur to being recognized as a, well, still large, but different kind of sauropod, a shorter-necked dicryosaurid from early Cretaceous Argentina.
Right, the reclassification is key.
Definitely. And even though the fossils are incomplete, that close look reveals so much. Its size, who it was related to, hints about its growth from those bone rings, and the diverse world it lived in.
Sharing the landscape with Amargasaurus and others.
Exactly. And the whole story, really, it just underscores how paleontology works, right? It's constantly refining ideas as new evidence comes up or old evidence gets a fresh look. It's a dynamic process.
Absolutely. A great reminder that science corrects itself and builds on previous work. It's amazing how much we can learn from just a few bones dug out of the ground millions of years later.
It really is.
Which leads to a final thought. Given that everything we know about Amargatitanis comes from essentially one partial skeleton, What else could be waiting in those La Marga rocks? What discoveries might completely shift our understanding again, maybe even challenge its place in the family tree or how we picture these animals.
That's the exciting part, isn't it? There could be so much more out there waiting to rewrite the story again.
It makes you wonder what secrets are still buried, ready to change our view of the ancient world.